Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining the webinar. We're just waiting for a few more participants to join us, and then we'll kick off just shortly after 2 o'clock Bangkok time. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. We'll just give it one more minute and then we will formally kick off. So thank you for your patience. Thanks. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining this webinar on taking forward the IUCN Green List of protected and conserved areas in Asia. It's just gone past the top of the hour, so I think we should begin the webinar. My name is Scott Perkin. I'm the head of the Natural Resources Group with the IUCN Asia Regional Office. I'm based in Bangkok, Thailand, and it's my pleasure to be your facilitator for the webinar this afternoon. This is the third webinar to be organized by the Asia Protected Areas Partnership, or APAP as we call it for short. It's been designed especially for APAP members, but given the interest in the topic, we have also widened out the invitation list a little bit to give other stakeholders an opportunity to participate as well. We'll hear much more about the IUCN Green List in the next few hours, but just to say that it is the new international sustainability standard which recognizes fair and effective protected area management. And so today's webinar has really been designed to do three things. First of all, we would like to introduce the IUCN Green List standard to you. We'd like to share some of the experience and the lessons that are being learned from several countries in the region that are already using the Green List standard. And then lastly, we'd like to end with a little bit of a discussion about the future of the IUCN Green List in the Asia region. Excellent. So today's webinar has been divided into two broad sessions. In session one, we'll begin with some opening remarks from the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, in its capacity as the new co-chair of APAP. This will be followed by an introduction to the IUCN Green List standard, which will be given by Mr. Dave Ayama from IUCN's Global Protected Areas Program in Switzerland. And then we'll hear some case studies. We'll hear first from China, which was one of the pioneers of adopting the Green List standard in Asia. And then we will hear from Malaysia. We'll have a short break, and then when we resume, we'll continue with the case studies. And in the second session, we'll hear from the Republic of Korea, another early pioneer of the Green List standard, and Vietnam. Vietnam has just had a site listed on the Green List, making it the first country in Southeast Asia to have a site on the IUCN Green List. So we should have a very rich discussion and very rich learnings from these four case studies. And at the end, as I said, we'll close the day with a bit of a discussion about some of the future directions for the Green List in Asia. So just a few housekeeping reminders. We hope to have ample time for discussion and questions. If you'd like to pose a question to any of the speakers today, please put your question in the chat box. The question and answer session will be facilitated by my colleague, Alex McWilliam, and he'll be monitoring the chat box throughout the entire webinar and collating the questions for us. To help ensure the smooth running of the webinar, I would kindly request that you keep your microphone on mute and keep your video off unless you are speaking. And I also just wanted to let you know that we will be recording the webinar so that it can be shared with others who aren't able to join us today. And we will also be sure to share all the PowerPoint presentations with the participants after the webinar. I'd like to close by thanking the Ministry of Environment Korea, the Korea National Park Service, the Ministry of the Environment Japan, for all their funding support to APAP, which allows us to implement activities such as this. And with that, let me say welcome again to all our participants. And without any further ado, I would like to invite Shri Rohit Tiwari, Inspector General of Wildlife with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, to kindly give his opening remarks. Tiwari, over to you.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you well, thank you.
So on behalf of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, I welcome you to this webinar on the IUCN Green List of Protected and Conserved Areas. This webinar is being held under the auspices of the Asia Protected Areas Partnership, a network of 21 government protected area agencies from 17 countries across the region. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, has been a member of this partnership since 2016. And I'm very happy to say that in December 2020, India became the third co-chair of APAP, taking over from the Ministry of Environment, Korea. And I'd like to take this opportunity to commend Korea for its leadership over the last 3 years, which has provided this partnership with a very solid foundation on which to build. India looks forward to taking up the responsibility and to further expanding the reach and achievements of APAP. This webinar is the first event in which India is participating in its role as APAP co-chair. I think that the IUCN Green List is a very appropriate topic for our debut. India has been concerned about enhancing the management effectiveness of its protected areas for many years now. And the results of the most recent assessment of some 146 national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, which was done in 2018-19, were announced last year. And these results show that our national parks and sanctuaries have an average score of 62%, which is significantly higher than the global average. So India has also developed its own management effectiveness tracking tool known as M-Stripes, which stands for Monitoring System for Tigers, Intensive Protection and Ecological Status. M-Stripes was launched in 2010 and was specifically designed to help strengthen the management of India's tiger reserves. And more recently, India has adopted the CATS, the Conservation Assured Tiger Standards, for use across all its tiger reserves. We have 51 tiger reserves as of now. India's emphasis on management effectiveness has really paid off. Among our successes, we have been able to conserve and expand the population of a number of threatened species, including not only the tiger, but also the Asian elephant and the Asiatic lion, and many more. So we very much look forward to learning more about the IUCN Green List of Protected and Conserved Areas and the ways in which it can build upon and complement these other initiatives. And now I know that we have a very busy agenda ahead of us today, so I'll end my remarks here. Once again, I welcome you to today's webinar and thank you for making the time to participate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those opening remarks, Mr. Tiwari. And we very much look forward to having India serving as the new co-chair of APAP. As you rightly said, India has a tremendous amount of experience when it comes to protected area management. And we're very much looking forward to learning more about India's very long history of effective protected area management. So thank you again. If I may now invite Mr. Dave Ayama, the Community Manager of the IUCN Green List of Protected and Conserved Areas, based in our Global Protected Areas program in Switzerland, to give his overview of the IUCN Green List standard.
Thanks very much, Scott. Just checking that you can hear me okay.
We can hear you. Yeah, thank you.
And do you prefer if I share my slides or do you do it from your side?
We can do it either way, however you'd like to do it.
Okay, let me try sharing my screen and then
okay, if there's any problems, we can back up.
Great, thanks. If you can just confirm, Scott, that you can see my slides on slideshow mode.
That looks perfect. Thanks.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning from Switzerland. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Devaya Ayama. I'm, as Scott mentioned, with IUCN, based in IUCN headquarters with IUCN's Global Protected Areas program. I'm the community manager for the IUCN Green List. And as part of my role, that's supporting a growing global community of protected and conserved area practitioners that are working together to recognize and improve protected and conserved areas around the world. And as part of my role, I do support the increasing momentum that we're seeing of the Green List in Asia. And I work very closely with Scott and his team in our Bangkok office to support the Asia region, thanks to some of the donors that Scott mentioned that support the promotion of the Green List work in the region. In today's global overview of the Green List, I'm just going to cover a bit of the background around the Green List. What are its key objectives, the way the IUCN Green List fits into IUCN's global strategic areas, give you a quick overview of the IUCN Green List standard, and talk briefly about the process of its implementation and the global benefits and values that we're seeing from the implementation of the IUCN Green List. For IUCN, the IUCN Green List is a relatively new initiative. It was piloted at the last World Parks Congress in 2014 in Sydney. And really the first version of the standard was launched at the last IUCN World Conservation Congress in 2016. And we've got into active implementation mode in 2017 and onwards. So what is the mission of the IUCN Green List of protected and conserved areas? It is to increase and recognize the number of effective, protected, and conserved areas globally. I should mention in the background in these slides, you will see images of green listed sites from around the world. We have around currently 49 sites that are on the IUCN Green List with several hundred candidate sites. So just to break down the mission of the IUCN Green List, it's equally important for IUCN that the IUCN Green List standard serves not only to recognize areas that are well managed and fairly governed, but also to use the standard to increase the number of protected and conserved areas that are well managed and fairly governed. And so the mission is both increasing and recognizing, as well as it applies to both protected and conserved areas globally. So these are areas that would meet the IUCN definition of protected area, as well as areas that would be considered as other effective area-based conservation measures. And that's the conserved areas piece. So the intent is that this is an area-based standard that serves both for legally protected areas or privately protected areas, areas that would meet the IUCN definition of protected areas, as well as going beyond what we would consider as a protected area into the OECM space. And that's an area that we're seeing increasing interest in the IUCN Green List as well. From IUCN's perspective, when we talk about effective management of protected areas, we are not talking just about effectively managed, but equally important is inclusive governance or equitable governance or fair governance. And you'll see that reflected as the first component of the standard, which I'll introduce to you in a few slides. Inclusive governance, effective management, and evidence demonstrating that conservation values have been identified and successfully conserved. Those are key aspects of the standard, and evidence is required to be compiled to demonstrate these key aspects. Also, the standard requires that protected areas are able to demonstrate some of their ecosystem service benefits. As we all know, protected areas provide an important societal role in our response to climate change mitigation and adaptation, as well as contribution to other global challenges such as water security and food security. So there are criteria and indicators in the standard that where a protected area can demonstrate how it's contributing some of these important responses. In terms of the key objectives, the first one is really about strengthening successful area-based conservation outcomes with the standard that provides a suitable mechanism and measure. Secondly, it's about building a global community. As you know, in IUCN, we have a global community through the World Commission on Protected Areas. This is a global network of over 3,000 practitioners and experts working on protected and conserved area issues. And the IUCN Green List standard is one standard that can serve to further activate this community, and be engaged closely with the IUCN World Commission, as well as other commissions of IUCN. And again, it's about creating a community that's working on issues related to the standard and using the standard to build capacity, both on management effectiveness as well as protected area governance. And thirdly, it's about facilitating collaboration across this community for the improvement of the management performance and governance of these areas. When we're talking about the contribution of the IUCN Green List initiative to global sustainability goals, these three areas are IUCN's three strategic areas that frame our work. This is from our last four-year program, and we have just released our latest four-year program, which has similar areas. But the heartland work of IUCN is around valuing and conserving nature, of course. This is where some of our other knowledge products, such as the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species, the IUCN Red List of Ecosystems, come under this work, as well as the IUCN Green List. But as you'll see, there are also two other strategic areas that IUCN works on, and these are around promoting and supporting effective and equitable governance of natural resources, and the deployment of nature-based solutions to address global sustainability challenges. And the Green List standard is designed to also contribute to these strategic areas in terms of equitable governance, as well as nature-based solutions to sustainability challenges. In the backdrop of our work, there's of course the UN Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs 14 and 15 in particular, of course, relate to biodiversity, but there are many other SDGs that the Green List standard and more broadly IUCN's work contribute to. Getting a bit more specific into the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, I'm sure a lot of us here are familiar with the different Aichi targets, and the one most relevant to protected and conserved areas is of course Aichi target 11, and of course the discussions of the post 2020 biodiversity framework are also featuring protected and conserved areas as a priority. But the way the IUCN Green List contributes specifically to Aichi target 11 is, as you'll see, the text here states, of course, the global percentages of terrestrial and coastal and marine areas. Those are the 17% and 10% targets that we're generally on track with, at least on the terrestrial side. But what's equally important to this target is the second half of this statement around these areas needing to be conserved through effectively and equitably managed, ecologically representative and well-connected systems of protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures, and integrated into the wider landscape and seascape. And this is exactly what the IUCN Green List standard is trying to contribute to. By implementing the IUCN Green List standard, protected and conserved areas can ensure that these areas are effective and equitably managed, and that they are considering the larger landscape and seascape context. So IUCN has been working within the CBD processes to get the recognition of the IUCN Green List of protected and conserved areas. As you can see here at COP13 in Mexico, there was a decision of CBD parties to promote the IUCN Green List as a voluntary standard to encourage protected area management effectiveness. And in the ongoing post-2020 framework discussions, the IUCN Green List standard will be promoted as a measure for the quality elements of protected areas for biodiversity and climate change under Target 2. So now I'll get into just introducing the standard, giving you an overview of the implementation process. In the interest of time, we may not get into very much detail, but of course we have more detailed presentations so that you can get insights into how it actually works in the different countries in the Asia region. So the first point around the standard is that it's a global standard. It addresses, as I've mentioned, not just management effectiveness, but other cross-cutting themes such as ecosystem services, governance. The global standard can be adapted to the national jurisdictional context, and there's independent evaluation of its implementation, and the standard itself is based on IUCN best practices and our different knowledge products related to protected and conserved area management. The standard is structured around 4 components. What we would see as 3 foundational components of good governance, sound design and planning, and effective management. These 3 components lead to successful conservation outcomes, which is the 4th component. Very quickly, this is an overview of the 17 criteria of the standard. So as I mentioned, there's 4 components around these 4 thematic areas. In total, there are 17 global criteria. So these would be conditions that we would expect protected and conserved areas to meet. And they would demonstrate that they're complying with these conditions through providing evidence, which will then be evaluated. Underlying each of these criteria are about 2 or 3 indicators that indicate the kind of evidence and information that sites need to provide to demonstrate that these 17 criteria and ultimately these 4 components are being met. These are just the titles of the conditions. So to give you an idea, in the good governance components, there are requirements around guaranteeing legitimacy and voice, achieving transparency and accountability, enabling governance vitality and capacity to respond actively, and so forth. I'll give you a moment to have a look at the titles of the rest of the criteria. As a quick overview of the implementation, the IUCN Green List initiative is a voluntary initiative, and it really starts from the ground. The commitment comes from the sites, as well as, so it starts with sites being interested in implementing the IUCN Green List, and we then work with the management authorities that are involved with that site at a national or jurisdictional level. And that becomes a commitment from a country to implement the process, because the implementation of the Green List starts at a national level. But typically we look for interest at a site level, so we are sure that the standard will be implemented in some sites in a country. Once the commitment is formalized, we have good interest at a country level and some interest from some sites. We will convene a national expert called an EAGLE. This is an expert assessment group for the Green List. The EAGLE is a group of experts that is selected through an open public call. These are experts that have expertise in issues related to the standards, so not just in management effectiveness, but also in governance issues, in socioeconomic issues that relate to protected and conserved areas. And they review the 50 indicators of the standard, which are meant to be globally applicable. There's an opportunity for them to adapt those indicators to the national context. If they do an adaptation, that goes through a public consultation, and then there's an IUCN Green List Standard Committee that will approve the adapted version to make sure that it's consistent with the global standard, and then sites can begin implementing that standard. So EAGLES are expert assessment groups, and when we talk about the Green List implementation, you hear this acronym a lot. So they don't have anything to do with eagles, but here's a nice picture of an eagle. But the idea is that these are experts that are drawn from the country. So it's also about drawing from the pool of experts in any country that we're implementing in the Green List who do the evaluation because they are experts in the issues related to the standard in that particular jurisdiction. IUCN, along with our training and assurance partner, conducts a training for these experts to become Green List evaluators. As I mentioned, this group is responsible then for reviewing the standard. And it is this group that then serves as the evaluators for the sites that then they will recommend these sites once they've reviewed the full files of the sites and have assessed that they meet the standard. They then recommend them for green listing. That's at the national level. Just to give you a quick idea of what happens at the site level. So there's 3 phases to the implementation at site level. There's an application phase where the site does an online registration where it commits to implementing and achieving the standard. As part of that, it does a self-assessment against 5 indicators that are what we would call eligibility indicators. So these are some of the fundamental requirements of just checking that you would meet some fundamental requirements before the site embarks on the full effort to implement the standard. So this is that the site meets the IUCN definition of protected area or conserved area, that it has a management plan or functional equivalent, that it has legal tenure over the area, that it has transparently communicated this information to the public. The expert group, a representative of the expert group, does a check of this information, and then the site is admitted to candidate phase. Candidate phase is really where the bulk of the work happens. So this is where the site provides evidence against all of the criteria and indicators. There's an important point here around stakeholder consultation. So it's important for IUCN for the site to do the self-assessment, but also to get input from stakeholders that are interested in the management and governance of the site, to get their perceptions and input in terms of how the site is being governed and managed. There's also a site visit done by 1 or 2 representatives of the expert group to make sure that that some of the evidence can be verified. And this site visit happens over a few days. It's also where Eagle members will interview stakeholders to ensure that there be good opportunities for stakeholder input. Now, if you're a well-managed site with good information compiled already, between the application to candidate phase and its completion should take between 3 to 6 months is what we've seen around the world. If in the candidate phase you identify certain challenges, certain actions need to be done in terms of where the site is performing in some of the criteria and what is expected from the standard, and this is part of the intention of the standard, is to help identify gaps and provide direction for how to address those gaps. So sites will typically have action plans, and this can take 1 or 2 years well, depending on what actions need to be taken. Sites would then implement those action plans, and that's why we've seen that can be maybe 1 or 2 years to implement those actions. And we do put a 5-year time limit on the maximum time that we would suggest for a site to move from application phase to green list phase, because we want to encourage sites to improve, but not have too much of a time pressure. So 5 years is considered enough time to improve capacity. And then if once the expert group has assessed that the site meets the standard, it's recommended to be added to the green list. That recommendation comes to a global IUCN Green List committee, which is like a global panel that does a final review. And then the site is added to the green list. And the certificate is valid for a period of 5 years. This is to ensure that the site continues to perform at the level of the standard. So it's not a permanent certification. We want to make sure that the site is performing at the level of the standard even after it receives a certificate. So there's a midterm review around the 2-3 year mark to make sure that things haven't changed on the ground. Where things have changed on the ground, and maybe there are some gaps again against the standard, the sites will then have 2 or 3 years to address those gaps. So by the time of the 5-year renewal of their certification, they've taken measures to make sure that the site continues to perform. We also expect that the standard itself is going to evolve, as with all sustainability standards. The standard will evolve to make sure that it's a comprehensive standard, that it's reflecting all of IUCN good practice. And so if the standard should evolve every 4 to 5 years, and then all sites will be expected to comply with the latest version of the standard. The standard complies with some of the best practices around standard setting. I'm not going to get into the detail of this, but we follow some credibility principles around good standard setting, and we work with an independent accreditation and assurance partner, that's Assurance Services International, who also works with other standards. When protected areas and conserved areas join the Green List, they get access to our cloud-based data platform, which is called Compass. It's basically a digital platform through which sites provide all of the evidence. So when we talk about sites providing evidence, they provide evidence into this digital platform that then becomes available to expert groups who do the evaluation of this material. They can access this material as soon as it's made available on the platform. So it's a very easy to access database that enables expert groups wherever they're located to have access to that evidence instantaneously. Sites, once they are admitted to the Green List, also have site profiles publicly on IUCNgreenlist.org, which is a newly launched website, as well as on the World Database on Protected Areas. We work with UNWCMC on making sure that Green List candidate sites and green listed sites are known on the World Database as well. So to give a quick summary of some of the values of the IUCN Green List from IUCN's perspective, from our global experience in implementing the Green List standard over the last few years. One is around having expert validation of site level implementation and success, and that's the role of the Eagle to provide that independent evaluation. And the capacity building that can come from the implementation, of course, of the standard. The second is around achieving global recognition for local conservation success. So through the implementation of the standard and the independent evaluation process, the site is getting IUCN validation of its successes, not just on conservation outcomes, but also on fair, inclusive, and equitable governance. It provides an opportunity for sites to enhance the communications of their good efforts in these areas. As I've covered before, it contributes to global sustainability goals. And it can also leverage aligned approaches, assessment tools, and investments. And I'm just going to wrap up in my remaining 5 minutes here by giving you some idea of what we mean when we talk about leveraging other aligned approaches. The IUCN Green List standard is meant to be able to build on other approaches, other tools. As I've mentioned already, it is a standard that is built on IUCN best practice, on IUCN publications, such as our best practices around governance, on the IUCN management effectiveness framework. So it's already building on material that's out there. It's building on tools and an assessment approaches that exist. It's not meant to be reinventing what's existing, but rather building on it and adding value. So very quickly, in the interest of time, I can't get into too much detail, but when we talk about management effectiveness, which tools and MET is obviously one of the better known management effectiveness methodologies, the IUCN Green List standard builds very much on the management effectiveness methodology. Just to show you the IUCN WCPA framework for protected area management effectiveness, which includes 6 elements: context, planning, inputs, process, outputs, and outcomes. And the evaluation cycle that you see here on the right-hand side. The emphasis of MET is about evaluating information about how well the management is being carried out currently through a systematic and relatively quick self-assessment. And of course, MET itself has evolved and is now available with its most recent launch in 2020 through an Excel tool that aids the implementation and compilation of results. The MET consists currently of 2 main sections. So these are the first one around data sheets that collect key information on the protected area, its characteristics, threats, and management objectives. And then an assessment form that provides a composite measurement across different parameters that integrate these 6 elements of the framework. As I mentioned, it's a self-assessment. It's designed around a questionnaire with 4 responses so that a site can self-evaluate itself and assign a score in terms of its perception of performance. And this can range between 0 to 3, 0 being poor, 3 being excellent. So just to say that the IUCN Green List process, all of this information that's compiled through, if any protected or conserved area has done a MET, all of the information that's compiled through a MET is very relevant for the Green List process. A protected area that has conducted a MET analysis is already at an advantage in the Green List process because the area already will have the information easily accessible, compiled. You would be able to provide that information quickly for the application phase. A lot of that information is going to be used in the candidate phase. In areas where the site may have scored itself, let's say less than 3, where it's dealing with some challenges, those are particular areas where the IUCN Green List standard can provide direction against these benchmark criteria in terms of what is needed for the site to improve. In areas where the site is doing well, if it's scoring itself on a 3, it can also use these benchmark performance criteria in the Green List standard to understand how it compares to what IUCN would consider as good practice. The Green List process, of course, is longer than a MET process, and it goes beyond just a self-assessment. So it requires that there's stakeholder input, that there's transparency in the assessment process. So it's adding additional information, adding additional stakeholder perspectives, and that's part of inclusive governance aspects, which the MET is not necessarily designed to assess. So the standard requires evidence of achieving good governance, as well as the standard requires that the site demonstrates specific evidence that all of the major natural values, as well as ecosystem and cultural values that have been identified, are actually being successfully conserved, and so that there's actual evidence. This is, again, an area where MET4 is starting to get into this, but the Green List standard is meant to go beyond what MET would do and actually require that sites have that conservation evidence. Finally, of course, the EGLE provides an independent assessment of this information, and the IUCN certification is that validation versus a MET, which is essentially a self-assessment and doesn't necessarily have that independent assessment aspect. A lot more information around MET can be found, of course, on the Management Effectiveness portal on Protected Planet, where there's also a Green List section as well. So I'll be quick in my last minute here, just to say in the same context of how MET is very relevant to the Green List, information compiled with through other conservation standards can also be used for green listing. So IUCN is part of the CATS initiative. This is a conservation assured tiger standard driven by WWF. IUCN is also involved with its design and implementation. And so we work together to ensure complementarity. So while CATS is a tiger conservation standard, it focuses on the tiger species and habitat. There's complementarity in that the Green List standard is going further in terms of its requirements around good governance criteria, as well as if you're implementing CATS and the Green List, you'll also be ensuring that all major site values are being identified. In addition, and CATS will help with ensuring that there's good information and data around the tiger species and its habitat and prey. But the Green List standard can complement that by ensuring that all of the major site values are identified and that there are performance thresholds for all of those for all of those conservation values. So the tiger standard would help with identification and setting of performance thresholds for the tiger species, and the Green List standard would work in concert with that to look at establishing some performance thresholds for some of the other major natural values. Lastly, we also see that there's a good complementarity between the IUCN Green List standard and its potential to support World Heritage nominations. So one out of 7 Green List sites is a World Heritage site currently. So we have several World Heritage sites that are IUCN Green Listed. And the standard and certification process can ensure that the integrity, protection, and management of all major site values, which would include those values of outstanding universal value, which are the values that the World Heritage Convention focuses on, are maintained successfully over the long term. And as part of a nomination process, a tentative site needs to demonstrate that it has integrity of management, and the Green List standard and certification can help demonstrate that. As well, the Green List standard and community can help tentative sites to identify any significant gaps in governance and management effectiveness and provide clear direction so that it can help sites improve their management. And it's a fully complementary and incentivized approach to all sites, so that even if the site is not successful necessarily on its World Heritage nomination, it would still get the IUCN validation and the global recognition that comes with that. In closing, just to give you a quick idea of the Green List in numbers, as I mentioned, we have 49 Green List sites from 15 countries around the world. This small map here on the right-hand side gives you an idea of the global spread of these Green List sites. As you can see, it's quite a wide geographic diversity. We are implementing in over 50 countries currently in terms of the national implementation process, so establishing e-goals. So we have about 500 candidate sites that are either formally registered in our system or interested in registering and implementing the standard. We have over 30 expert groups. So some of these regions also form regional expert groups that are covering multiple countries, where there are small states, for instance, in the Middle East and West Asia region, we have a regional eagle. So that's also a possibility. We have lots of partner organizations because the Green List is implemented through partnering with national organizations. And of course, on the global governance side, we have some of these committees that I mentioned, supported by some of these donors mentioned here. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Scott. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deb, for that comprehensive overview of the Green List. I think one of the things that I personally particularly like about the Green List is that it's a positive message. You know, in conservation, we're so often used to the negative messaging about, you know, the IUCN red list of threatened species, species going extinct, the World Heritage Sites in danger list. And in general, the conservation message is often pretty bleak. But the green list is the flip side of that. It's about recognizing excellence. It's about recognizing areas that are being well managed and are achieving their conservation outcomes. And I personally find that quite inspiring. I'll hand over now to Alex just to coordinate a brief question and answer session. We have about 10, 12 minutes for any questions that you might have. I've seen a couple have come through in the chat box. Please do continue to send in your questions if you would like to raise anything. Alex, over to you.
Great, thanks, Scott. And yes, as Scott mentioned, we'll try to keep on time throughout the rest of the webinar. So we've got about 13 minutes for questions. And let me pose a couple first to you, Dev, that have come up in the chat. And the first question is around the green list criteria or indicators, and can those be framed at a regional level? And the concern here is about that perhaps each country or region where the green list might be adopted might not fall into the same general framing of the indicators that are used at a global level. So can the green list criteria and indicators be framed at a regional level?
Yes, and the short answer is yes. And I'll just mention that also to Scott and others in IUCN to feel free to jump on and add to some of my answers because there's lots of people here that know the green list well. And so the short answer is yes. The global standard is 17 criteria that those are what we would say would be fixed. But underlying that are 50 indicators that are globally applicable. And in each country that we implement, as part of the training of the expert group will review those 50 indicators and assess whether some of them can be adapted to the national or regional context. So as I mentioned earlier, we implement both at a country level in some regions where there may be many small countries with a very similar protected area context, such as the Middle East region. They have looked at the indicators and adapted them for the regional context. I will say though that typically the majority of the indicators work well in many countries around the world. Typically, we may see 10% or less of those indicators that actually get adapted to the country or regional context.
Great, thanks, Dev. And the next question we have relates to the following, and that is, Dev, could you comment on the use of the Green List standard as a guide to managers on best practice management, separate from the processes of adding a site to the Green List itself?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And the Green List standard and its accompanying user manual is an open access standard. It's publicly available. It's meant to be a global reference and a global benchmark of how IUCN defines best practice at a site level. So absolutely, it can be used as a guide for sites that may still be in early stages of understanding how standards can help improve management. It's still beneficial to use the standard to see the kinds of information that it requires. It's beneficial for maybe new protected areas that are designing management plans that could be aligned well with the standards, so that after compiling some of this information or after designing a new management plan, they would be well positioned to embark on a green list process at some point in the future if they choose to do so. As I mentioned, it's a voluntary process. So it's really up to the site to decide if they want to embark on that certification process, but absolutely they can use the standard as a guide independent of that process. In some countries, Colombia, France, Mexico, as examples, they're making reference to the IUCN Green List standard at a national level. and encouraging the entire system of protected areas to aim towards the Green List standard. So that they may not yet have committed all of the sites in the country to the Green List, but it's an example where they're at a national level, the national authority is promoting the use of the standard as in terms of an open access.
Thanks, Dev, and encourage colleagues on the webinar to please place your questions in the chat, and I can raise them with the relevant person, most likely Dev. Dev, let me follow on from that question and ask you about further the Eagles and these expert advisory groups. And you mentioned that there's an open public call put out in each country to establish the Eagles. What is the common size of the expert advisory groups that have already been established? Are they 30 people or 5 or 10? Firstly, and let me add, secondly, do they have a role in advising the sites? They will obviously conduct the assessments that you mentioned, the evaluations, but do they also play a role in advising the sites on how to improve on areas that have been seen to have shortfalls in the assessments?
Thanks, Alex. Good question. So to the first point, yeah, it depends on the size of the country, I would say. So typically the range of Eagle size is 5 to 15 members. So if it's a smaller country, it can be less than 10. I would say the average size is between 10 to 12 individuals. It's important for us to ensure that there's diversity. So it's not just, so firstly, that there's diversity of sectors. So it's representing government, civil society organizations, academia, that there's gender balance, that there's expertise on all of the different issues related to the standard. So as I mentioned earlier, not just management effectiveness, but also on issues related to governance, on issues related to socioeconomic issues. And therefore, based on the context of the country, that can influence the size of the Eagle. But I would say probably 5 is too small, but the typical number is between 8 to 12. In large countries such as China, it can go up to over 20 individuals, but generally we would keep probably a maximum size of 20-25 individuals, but generally on average it's around that 10 to 12 number. On the second point, yes, it's an important point. So the Eagle members are really meant to be evaluators, and in order for them to be independent, they cannot actually advise the sites on how to implement the standard, because there would be a conflict of interest there. So when we do the training, as part of that training, Eagle members have to sign a declaration of engagement that will also declare any conflicts of interest that they may have. So sometimes Eagle members may have worked with protected areas, or sometimes we even may have, we can have even park directors that are Eagle members, but they would, in some regions where there may be a smaller pool of experts, but they would recuse themselves from actually voting on their own site or on sites that they know well, because there would be a conflict of interest. And so the idea is that they're really serving as evaluators, and we do have a role as well that we're working on developing. A lot of the effort right now has been on training of expert members and Eagles, but we also have a role of site mentors in the Green List ecosystem, where sites can agree with a volunteer or a partner organization that is collaborating with them to improve management and governance. And site mentors can directly advise the sites in terms of how to implement the standard, and they can support the site in compiling information, and it can be very helpful and beneficial for sites to have a site mentor. It can help them advance, let's say, more quickly through the process. It helps them understand a bit some of our systems, like the digital system. I hope that answered your questions.
That's great, Dev. Yeah, thanks very much for that. And I think your response there will be quite useful for the participants on the webinar as well. I have lots of questions, but let me turn and do my job as facilitator and return to the comments and the questions that have been raised in the chat. And the next one is directed to you, Scott. Can you comment on how you see the Green List fitting in with the APAP agenda here in the region and the potential for it to work at a regional level, perhaps aiming for the most significant sites across the region for green listing, and also as a means of sharing experiences and best practices across the region as well? Scott.
Sure, thanks a lot for the question. I think APAP is actually very well designed to help take forward and promote the Green List. One of the things we're particularly keen on using APAP for is to share experience and learnings across the region among countries that are already using the Green List, but also between countries that haven't yet adopted the standard and those that have. And I think today's webinar is actually a perfect example of that sort of thing. However, we've also created a working group under the auspices of APAP, a special working group on the Green List. It was supposed to be inaugurated last year, but then of course, COVID-19 hit. We really want to have this as a face-to-face, in-person working group. So we've put it on hold for the moment and have switched to these sorts of online platforms for the time being. But our vision is still that this working group will be set up under APAP. We will get countries meeting face-to-face, and we will use that in a very informal way, very constructive way, very frank way, just to share experiences and learnings. We're also keen on continuing to build capacity for the Green List, perhaps through dedicated technical workshops for those who are interested in learning more about the standard. A couple of years ago, one of the APAP technical workshops was in fact on management effectiveness, and we did have a half a day spent entirely on the Green List. And so that was kind of the first introduction, but I think it provides a foundation for building on further and perhaps having more in-depth technical workshops in the future. As far as sort of looking at sites that could be prioritized, I would say we've done less on that. That's certainly something we could look at in the future. But at the moment, our priority focus has really been around sharing experience, building capacity, raising awareness. Thanks for the question. I'm just wondering, Alex, if we should maybe move on now, unless there are any other burning questions in your chat box.
No, the chat box is clear of all the questions raised by the group. I suggest in the interest of time, we proceed with the remainder of the webinar.
Great. All right. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for the question. Keep them coming. But I'd like now to turn to China, which was one of the early adopters of the IUCN Green List standard and has a particularly rich experience to share. And I would like to invite Professor Li, who's the vice chair of the China Eagle, to give his presentation about the experiences in China. Professor Li, over to you.
Oh, yes, okay. This one? Yeah. Hello.
We can see your slides, but could I please request you to put it on presentation mode, slideshow mode? Great.
Okay.
That's perfect. Yep, we're all set. Please go ahead.
Okay, everyone. I just give a brief introduction about the Green List protected area. Some current states and the future perspective. And this is a six the first is about the background of China protected area. after more than 6 years of development, there are more than 20,000 natural thousand protected area is established in China, and cover about 80% of Chinese land area. Where to protect the different steps. So something focus on biodiversity conservation, and some things about the geological wetland and water park, something. This is a general distribution of the protected area in China, and also some species diversity patterns and ecosystem service function important area also covered by the protected area. Now, within 3 years, a new system of protected area categorized in China, and something is national park pilot area within the 5 years, and the national resource is about 2,000, more than 2,000 natural resource, and where is natural park. So the basic important area covered by the protected areas, but how to improve the management effectiveness is a key task for China. So when the Green List criteria introduced to China, and the key goals for to enhance and maintain the effectiveness of protected area, and especially for protected area sustainable development. This is a requirement of conservation on biodiversity and a global consensus. So China adopted the IUCN Green List criteria to effectively measure the management effectiveness of protected area in accordance with the international standards, and provide the international coordination for the effective live of protected area. So the basic processes is according to the IUCN Green List standard. And so formation the EGO workshop to discuss the criteria and indicators, and also adaptations of the indicators one by one, and how to understand the meaning to fit the national context, and also training the egos and training the experts from protected area willing to participate the IUCN Green List protected area, and also ego experts traveling to such cities and check if the PA cities meeting the standards of GLPA. And now 6 cities has already achieved the standards in the first list, and 6 protected area in the processes. No, this is in 2014 and 6 protected areas is included listed in the GLPA, and Tangjiahe, Changqing, East Dongting Lake, and Fangshan, Wudanianchi, and Nongwan. So some very important activities. I think is the first important is training for the GLPA applicants, and included 2 or 3 group training for GLPA applicants, and one by one discussion for all GLPA applicants, especially for the core protected value for each protected area, and what is the key risks, and how to assessment assess the PA conservation actions, and give some best practices of PA management activities, and especially for successful conservation story for core value conservation. And some experience and lessons in China application processes. So the how to tell a good story is up to the standards is a very important aspect. And what is the practice? What information can prove that you are up to the standards, and what is the gaps to the GLPA standards, and how to improve is a very important aspect. Where is your innovation, and how to follow it? So this is need to talk to one by one GLPA application, and also something sometimes a lack of some kind of information, included stakeholder participated, and women involved, and where is related complaints, and need some this kind of information. And this before the in the process of training for GA applications, we need to identify what are the core protection values and objectives, and what is the risk to core values, and how to monitor and respond to those risks, and social and economic impacts of protection and management, and the stakeholder, and need to one questions by one questions. So this is about the some criteria. What is management? What is a good management, and how to lead to innovate and management concept and protectiveness of protected area. So this is some important aspect need to explain to the GLPA applications. And then in the this is some process of using the standard at a set level, and need to training and preparation of staff and self-assessment against the standard, and treat and identify information and management gap to to the standards and the development and the implementation of action plan and prepare the document and the cooperation with EGO to field check. And we then use the Shenongjia National Park as an example to show the using the standard at 30 levels. Now, Shenongjia National Park is a pilot national park pilot area, and we combine 6 protected area into one national park. And from about this is in Hubei province, and about 1,170 square kilometers. Have many kind of vegetation zones from the evergreen deciduous broad level mixed forest in the north hemisphere, and the completely wetter vegetation spectrum of the north subtropical mountains, and it has spatial, ecological, and cultural value. Now that the Shenongjia has 3 international brands of UNESCO World Natural Heritage, World Biosphere Reserves, and World Geopark, and also is listed in the international important wetland, and is so rich in biodiversity and geological record something. And this is also have about 320 personnel in the national park, and responsible for natural resource protection, scientific research, science popularization, and education, ecotourism, and community co-management. And during the pilot activities of Shenongjia National Park, have completed the established of instruction, legislation, system construction, policy platform construction, scientific research platform construction, and natural reserve inventory, the franchise and tourism activity management. They have make some special plans for protection, scientific research, and the community development have been formulated. The national park have made some natural threats, such as forestry fire, the terrain, extremely calamity events, and biological invasions, and also some pests, forestry pests, and human distribution about the national park is forming land recommendation, grazing, firewood collection, and medicine collecting, and by the local community resident. and infrastructural construction of road, water support, and so on, and also ecotourism activities is important this report. Also have some management problem about this is some important some photos. This is 大九湖 wetland, and this dwarf tree and golden monkey is a very important conservation goals. And about the benefit and the challenge. Okay. Okay. This is the through the GLPA application, the national park can understand the gap between them, their management status and the national requirement, national good management levels. So they try to collect some information and make some decision and to improve their management. 5 the lessons learned need to improve the transparency of management effectiveness and invite stakeholders to participate in management and protect it. And the second is necessary fully understand the ecological and the cultural value and the risks of protected area. The focus on the objective of ecosystem and biodiversity and the cultural protection. And the recommendation that I would like to share with other countries. And one is carry out effective traveling. And the second is according to the goal orientation and the problem orientation, analyze the existing problem. The 3 is evaluate the effectiveness of protection and timely modify and improve the protection strategy. And the stakeholders are encouraged to take positive measures for the management. And in the design and the effective evaluation of protected areas, the government should refer to this standard. Okay. The summary. IUCN GLPA standard localization is a key step to carry out the GLPA certification, and it is an effective way to promote the GLPA application. And in the processing of application for IUCN Green List, Shenongjia National Park prepare relative supportive materials and fund the gaps management gaps. The Shenongjia National Park meets the requirement of IUCN Green List for good governance and design something. Okay, this is thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee, for that very comprehensive and detailed overview of the Green List in China and also the case study from Shenongjia National Park. I'm sorry that wasn't sufficient time to really go into all the detail that you had in your slides, but we will share the presentation afterwards, and people will be able to read through the slides at their leisure and take on board the full detail that you've presented. We perhaps have time for just one question if there are, if any have come in. I'm looking at Alex. If not, since time is a bit short, perhaps we'll move on to the next case study from Malaysia. Thank you again, Professor Lee. We really appreciate you taking the time. And let me move to Malaysia and invite Ms. Yeo Bee Hong, who's the chair of the Malaysia Eagle, and also Dr. Achir Chung from the Sugud Islands Marine Conservation Area in Sabah to talk about their green list experience in Sabah, Malaysia. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity for us to share the learnings and experiences in Malaysia. I will just give a very brief sharing about Green List implementation at the Malaysia level, and I will pass it to Achir, who will be talking more about the hands-on experience implementing Green List at the site level. So we will give you an idea of the process that we took, and basically to answer the question why Malaysia adopted the Green List and what was the process that we took to adopt the program. Basically, Malaysia has been using various tools for measuring effectiveness of protected and conserved areas, and WWF Malaysia found out about Green List back in 2015, and they were very interested to find out how the program could motivate and have that vision for different stakeholders to be able to come together and have the ownership to work and build a system that could bring some transformation or continuous improvement to the protected area management in the country. And hence, therefore, there were three kind of process that Malaysia went through. From 2015 to 2017, it was quite a process of finding out more. And also IUCN provided a lot of support. They came over to Malaysia and they organized a few introductory sessions on Green List and engaging various protected areas management agencies. And from there, we got our first batch of Malaysian Eagles trained and formalized in October 2017. The first batch was selected by the WCPA regional vice chair. And since the first group that was selected on this day, we immediately worked on adapting the standards. And we took about 6 to 7 months to go through the standards, all the indicators and verification, and adapted it to the Malaysian jurisdiction. And with that, we also translated the standards into Bahasa Melayu, which is the national language, so that Green List could be more extensive and reach out to different parts of Malaysia. And with that, we also organized our stakeholder consultation process, and we divided it into 2 types of stakeholders. The first group were the key stakeholders that we wanted to meet face-to-face and explain Green List, which covered the 3 regions in Malaysia, Sabah, Sarawak, and Peninsular Malaysia. And at the same time, we thought that it would be also important to reach out to local and indigenous communities at a more simpler level to explain what Green List is all about. And if they had any feedback in terms of the standards that we could therefore include in our adaptation. And besides that, we also announced the adapted standards online for 60 days to invite feedback for stakeholders we could not meet during that time. After the whole process, we had an opportunity to, after that the Green List committee endorsed the Malaysian adapted standards, we had the opportunity to present it at a regional conference so that we could further share about our Green List experience to the practitioners in the region. So with that, we continuously had IUCN Dave and Matt. They were undertaking trainings for us for the Eagles and also to the site as well. So we had also a workshop on integrated green list assessment and site survey workshop back in 2019. Fast forward, we are now in more or less our third phase. So we added a few more eagles to the group, and we have our second round of our second chair now. And we realized that we have a lot of positive things that we could learn from the global program. At the same time, there were opportunities to be more specific in terms of how it could work efficiently at the Malaysian level. And hence, we had also adopted a Malaysian Green List Eagle Handbook. And as what Dave mentioned just now, our third phase, we were very much looking into developing the mentors who could provide more direct contact and support to the sites. As assessors, we are not able to provide that direct advice. So we are now trying to develop our mentor program. And we had a call of expression of interest. And we had our first mentor training in February 2021 with 22 participants. Just a very quick overview of the Eagle Mentor Group. Eagle Group, we basically have 12 members on our team, and we have our implementing partner, WWF, who acts as a secretariat. And so we come from a very diverse group of social, legal, economics, protected areas, marine and terrestrial backgrounds. It's very helpful in that sense, because when we go through the standards, we can rely on each other for their expertise to share their experience and see whether we are rigorous enough in assessing whether the sites meet the standards. And just quickly, just to give you an idea, we now have 5 sites who have registered on the Green List program, and a few more sites are interested. Just this to share the list of sites that are on the Green List program in Malaysia at the moment. Thank you for your attention. I'll now pass the presentation to Aceh to take over. Thank you. Aceh, over to you.
Thank you, Bihong. I've just on my camera for a while, and after that, so I'm going to turn it off. So, okay. I shall do a short introduction to myself. I'm the lead marine biologist for reef guardians that have been managed the Sugod Island Marine Conservation Areas that we call the SIMCA here for the past 16 years. I was the Eagle member for Malaysia from 2018 to 2020, but because of SIMCA is potentially to be a green listed, so to avoid the conflict of interest of being an Eagle members and the application site, so I withdraw myself from the Eagle membership and become a mentor for SIMCA or Reef Guardian for the green list applications. So a bit of introductions of SIMCA. So SIMCA, Sugod Island Marine Conservation Area, is the first privately managed MPA in Malaysia. So it was gazetted in 2001 under provision of the Sabah Wildlife Enactment 1997. It is a joint management and collaborations with the Sabah Wildlife Departments, and is the IUCN Category 2 protected area, which is for the biodiversity conservation for education and recreational purposes. The list is 30 years between Reef Guardians and the state of government Sabah. And Reef Guardian have been giving full mandate to conserve and manage the activity within the SIMCA. Geologically, SIMCA located in the Sulu Sea. Can we go to the next slide, Bihong? Okay, so this is a map. The left is a Google map, and the detailed maps on the right. SIMCA located in the Sulu Sea, the northeastern side of the Sabah Borneo. So that's so SIMCA is about 80 kilometers from the mainland, from Sandakan town. The size of the SIMCA is about 46,317 hectares. It consists of 3 islands, which is Rangkaian, Bilian, Tegapil Islands. And SIMCA is located within the Coral Triangle Initiative area. The CTI, if you know about that, is the multilateral partnership of the 6 countries that working together to sustain marine and coastal resources by addressing issue on food security, climate change, and marine biodiversity. Bihong, can we go back to the the second one? Up. Okay. Okay. So the 3 islands, the site value, the 3 islands of Simca are important foraging and nesting ground for the 2 species of sea turtles, which are green and hawksbill turtles. Last year, our team records a video sighting of leatherback turtles that not very far from the islands. So the presence of these 3 species adding significant values to the site. Furthermore, the surrounding areas are healthy coral reef and seagrass habitats, which are important nurturing ground for many important marine species. Additionally, Langkayan also reported the spawning aggregations for the coral trout in 2012. I myself reporting the Simca may contains higher coral trout abundance in compared to other sites in Malaysia. So with the healthy coral reef habitats, Reef Guardian in collaboration with the local university published a paper on the coral spawning in Langkayan just recently. So the record of the corresponding events with the conservations within the conservation area demonstrate the importance of the coral seedling area for the long-term recruitment of coral colony to the surrounding sea. After that, then in the managing threats, so Reef Guardian identified threats. Listed here are illegal fishing, pollutions, and also the climate change issue. So illegal fishings are, for example, fish bombings and sodium cyanide fishing and bottom trawling. So Reef Guardian have its own enforcement team that's trained and certified as a Sabah honorary wildlife wardens to stop and detain illegal fishing boat within the MPA. So to assist the enforcement work, the Reef Guardian even setting up an enforcement steering committee with the Malaysian enforcement agencies such as Marine Police to combat on this illegal fishing activities within these conservation areas. For the second threat is the For the second threat is the pollutions, especially the sedimentations and river runoff problems from the mainland. So from the experience is that in 2007, there was a 7 days continuous rain on the mainlands that result on the river waters or river runoff that reaching the shallow reef in Langkayan. The river, which is about 26 kilometers from the islands. So during that event, the freshwater kill corals and invertebrates up to 4 meters to the reef. It reduced in live coral cover to less than 10% at the affected reef. Next, please. Next again. Oh no, sorry, I forgot the third threat. Okay, the third threat, which is linked to the second threat, which is with the climate change issue, which affecting rainfall. We increase of air temperature and sea temperature that result mass coral bleachings and reduce and live coral covers and cause ecosystem collapse. So, okay, sorry, Beihong. So we can go to the next slide. So the reason why Simca is selected for the IUCN Green List standards are, I think that's a way to demonstrate management and conservation's outcome for the past 20 years. Secondly, that we are using that for identifications of gaps and solution for the management effectiveness. And then thirdly, to achieve the Green List is to demonstrate excellency in the work that we do. And in the process of application for IUCN Green List for Simca, Reef Guardian started the IUCN Green List in the mid-2019 by participations in the stakeholder consultations. So the application of Green List for Reef Guardian is a two-man work actually. So beside me, there is a Davis, a senior marine biologist for Reef Guardians. After he attended the stakeholders consultation from the Malaysian Eagle. So we went through the process for the self-assessments against standards. And then after the gap analysis, And then after that, we indicate the interest to be the applicants. Then we preparations of the Green List documents. And because of only the two-man work, it took us almost a year to get into the current candidate phase. So we are currently in the stage of preparation for the panorama solutions and site value before we jump into the next stage for site evaluation by the EGO member. Okay, next, please. As for the benefits of using IUCN Green List standard, I think that standard is a very systematic guide for the MPA effectiveness from components from a good governance, a sound design, effective management that lead to conservation outcome. So before the Green List standard, I think Reef Guardian have been using a guidebook that we call How is your MPA doing? I think that's published by IUCN too. So we evaluate using that tool for management effectiveness. The assessment was done in 2008 and 2015 with the interval of 5 years. For that assessment, gap were identified, and we produced a 5-year action plan to guide operation and management effectiveness of SIMCA. As for the challenges of using this standard is that the resources, the first one is the resources is a challenge that I mentioned earlier. The whole process from the beginning is until today is a two-man job. So there's no extra fund to support these applications. So we have to doing it during our free time. And after that, secondly, our experience is that the terminology in that standard can be confusing for non-scientists, or for example, ecosystem values or ecosystem services and nature value that kind of term can be confusing. And the third challenges is the preparations of the document for the candidates submissions, candidate phase submission. Some of the document, for example, the proof of meetings of the minutes that back before 2001 could not be found. And the fourth challenges is to demonstrate conservation outcome. Giving examples here is like the percentage of live coral covers that's supposed to show improvement over decades of conservation efforts. But however, because of the climate change, for example, the percentage of the coral cover decreased. And the fifth challenges here is, I think that's a challenges that everybody facing right now with the COVID-19 on the financing on MPA. So this COVID impact the normal activities, affecting tourism activities that result in reductions of the revenues and resources to fund PA operations. Bihal, next. Okay, as a lesson learned, we personally think that to achieve management and conservation outcome, it requires a great efforts of a team that highly dedicates personnel from the managers to the field workers, and the cross collaboration and engagement with the stakeholders are important to make this work. As for the recommendations for the potential PA or CA for the Green List applications, the self-assessment and gap analysis are important to assess if there are conservation outcome. For example, here, the newly established PA or MPA that have yet show any conservation outcome. Identify site value is equally important. Having a baseline or threshold data to support the conservation outcome. It is recommended that also, if it needed, appoint a mentor or two if needed. Lastly, I think that the recommendation is keep seeking help from the EGO members. I seek help from EGO members quite often. So next one. So as a summary, there's articles that we recently that recently published on 18th of March by the Commonwealth Charter. So this article summarizes the 2 MPA candidates, Malaysian MPA candidates for the IUCN Green List. The link is there in this slide. So the 2 MPA, which are the Sugod Island Marine Conservation Area and also the Tun Mustafa Park. So I would like to end my presentation, and thank you.
Great. Thank you very much to both of you for that really informative presentation and for a summary of the process in Malaysia and in Sabah. And of course, we wish you every success with the continued journey, and hope that your site, Sugod Islands, will be green listed very soon. I don't think any questions have come in, and I can see that we're pretty much spot on time. So why don't we take a 10-minute break now? I encourage you just to stay online. We will also show a short video during the break. So if you're not desperate for a cup of tea or a comfort break, please stick around to watch the video. It's only 4.5 minutes long, but it's a rather nice story about a green listed site in Lebanon. Otherwise, please try to join us again at basically in 10 minutes at 10 minutes to 4 Bangkok time. Okay, and can we show the video? Okay, thanks.
محمية أرز الشوف الطبيعية هي من أكبر المحميات الطبيعية بلبنان. صارت مع 22 ضيعة المحيطين فيها محمية محيط حيوي. دورها الأساسي حماية النظام الإيكولوجي الذي يتميز بغابات الأرز، واللي بتحتوي بداخلها 30% من غابات الأرز المتبقية في لبنان.
القائمة الخضراء هي مقياس دولي وضعته الاتحاد الدولي لصون الطبيعة لتقييم الإدارة الفعالة للمحميات الطبيعية.
الهدف الأساسي كان من أرز الشوف أنه تتقدم على الجرين ليست لنتأكد أنه نحن إدارتنا فعالة، إدارتنا عم تلعب دورها بحماية هالنظم الإيكولوجية، وعم تلعب دورها بهالتفاعل اللي لازم يكون بين المحميات وكل المجتمعات المحلية الموجودة حولها.
الاتحاد شكل مجموعات من الخبراء بكل منطقة من مناطق العالم، بنسميهم احنا الإيجل جروب، منوطة بأن هي تقيم الملفات بتاع الترشح بتاع المحميات.
أول مرحلة كانت مرحلة السيلف أسسمنت أو التقييم الذاتي. كل مؤشر كان لازم نبرهن إنه هيدا المؤشر نحن مطابق لأعمال المحمية. حطينا وثائق كلها صارت على الموقع الكومباس، في حوالي 200 وثيقة بتبرهن إنه المحمية هي بتطابق كل هالمعايير هيدولي. هيدا كله صار بالتعاون مع المرشد ثيري لوفيفر، وساعدنا ببعض الاشياء اللي ما كانت واضحه.
عملنا استمارة عن مواضيع بتخص المحمية، أهمها الحوكمة، الحماية، التواصل والشكاوى وغيرها. هيدي الاستمارة حطيناها اونلاين على الويب سايت المحمية، وكمان حطينا الكيو ار كود على المداخل المحمية، ال4 مداخل. بإمكان الزوار يلي هن كمان ستيك هولدرز بمجرد ما انه يشوفوا هذا الكيو ار كود بتاخدهم على الرابط يلي هو على الاستمارة.
قامت المحمية، محمية أرز الشوف، بتجربة كتير مهمة مع الأفرقاء اللي بيتعاطوا يوميا مع المحمية، اللي هي بسميها وورد كافيه، وهي بتقضي انه الافرقاء يكونوا موزعين على طاولات مختلفه، وكل طاوله في عليها ميسر محضرين نحن اكيد الاسئله.
نحن حاليا بمرحله التقييم الميداني. استقبلنا خبيرين من الإيجل ممبرز بالمنطقه
احنا درسنا الملف كامل في بلداننا كل واحد في مكانه، والهدف ان احنا نيجي نشوف على ارض الواقع ما يثبت الدوكيومنتس اللي اتقدمت.
بهالثلاث ايام بدنا نلتقي مع اصحاب المصلحه او ذوي العلاقه اللي بتشتغل معهم المحميه، البلديات، المزارعين، السيدات اللي هن ناشطين جدا بإدارة برنامج التنمية الريفية، أصحاب الخدمات، بالإضافة إلى اللي فيه شوية تضارب باستخدام الأراضي بيننا وبينهم. التقينا كمان بفريق عمل المحمية وبالباحثين اللي هن عم يشتغلوا على الأمور العلمية بالمحمية.
بنخلق من خلال القائمة الخضراء جو في حافز ان هو يشجع المحميات او الدول نفسها ان هي تقدم وتبقى على القائمة الخضراء.
وبالنسبة لمحمية أرز الشوف نحن رح نضل عم نشتغل أكثر ما فينا لنضل ضمن هيدا المستوى، لنكون دايما مندرجين ضمن الجرين ليست.
Great. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll start the webinar again in just a minute or two. So. Great. Well, welcome back, everyone. And we'll continue now with the case study presentations. Our next presentation will look at the experience of the Republic of Korea, which was also an early adopter of the Green List standard, one of the pioneers of the standard, and also has some very rich experience to share with us. So if I could invite Dr. Ha-Kyung Heo, who's a senior research fellow with the Korea National Park Service, to give his presentation. And I believe we'll control the slides from here. So just let us know when you would like to change the slides, and we'll be happy to do that for you from here.
Thank you very much for your introduction. So I'm Ha-Kyung Heo from Korea National Park Service. and I'm currently working for Research Institute as a general manager of Policy Development Division. So many thanks, Scott and Mr. Ko, to organize this seminar, web seminar, and some presenters and colleagues from Asia region. So it's a very honor and pleasure to provide our case studies. So let me start with my introduction of the national parks. So next slide. Today, I will try to introduce our case study divided into two parts. The pilot phase experience and relisting phase experience. Next. So let me start with a brief introduction of the national parks. So national parks have generally nationally representative ecosystem and natural and cultural landscapes, and we aim to manage it to soundly conserve and sustainable use. Next. So there are 22 national parks in Korea. The number of ID is the designation order. The blue one is the green list site. Next. As a management authority of national parks, Korean national parks have been established in 1987, and the KMPS has four main strategic targets: nature conservation and benefit sharing, and safe national parks, and the sustainable management system. Next. I borrowed this slide from the site summary, which developed using the IUCN Green List committee. So Jirisan is the first national park and largest national parks in Korea. And more than 5,400 species, animal species inhabiting Jirisan National Park. Next. And Seraksan National Park is the center of the Korean Peninsula and middle of the Korea axis known as Baekdu-Daegan axis, and also the first biosphere reserve area in Korea. Next slide. The Osesan National Park is the designated as the 11th national park in Korea, and is designated in 1975. And right side, the picture is the forest and the approach trail in Osesan National Park. Next. So previously I presented the APAP technical workshop before, so I briefly introduced it. So this slide showed why did KMPS decide to adopt the IUCN Green List. So previously we tried to get more better management in Korean national parks. So we adopted IUCN category systems and conducted management effectiveness evaluation. And now we just find out some good global standard to manage national parks. So we think the IUCN Green List could provide a direction for effective management of national parks. And so as a management agency, KMPS needs to prove our achievement. So IUCN Green List could be the better way to prove the performance of KMPS. And we try to more attention from stakeholders and publics or beyond the national jurisdiction. So I mean the globally on our national parks. Next. This is our process at the pilot phase. So KMPS engaged in Green List initiative from the very first stage. So we concluded the MOU with IUCN regarding Green List in 2012. So during World Conservation Congress in Jeju, and then we organized some national expert assessment groups, and and international orientation workshop, etc. And next slide. This slide shows the series of the meetings to implement the green list in Korea. So we got some expert meeting with including the foreign experts and make some site managers meetings. Next slide. And this one, some of you might attend this meeting. So in the World Park Congress in Sydney, 2014 is a certification. Next. We organized first Korea Eagle groups, so from university and research institutes and NGOs. So composed of 7 people. So the 7 bands that at the time we didn't achieve the gender balance. Next. So this is the releasing place experiences. So after long silence preparation period, we officially reorganized IUCN Eagle groups in Korea. So totally 9 members, including 2 female members. And just October, that we established often the orientation workshop for Eagle members and the site managers. And the 19 December to 20 February, we uploading the first contents at the conference for 3 green sites. And then the last February, we reviewed the first review from Eagle members to the contents of the conference. And we have some small Eagle group meetings, and the local managers complement the contents of the conference. And then we made the brief site visit plans. Next slide. Then we have the meetings, Eagle meetings, to decide how to conduct the field missions and review the current progress. So the Eagle member decided to conduct a site visit even in period of the COVID-19. So we made some simple field survey checklists, and using this checklist, there's 1 or 2 Eagle members participated in the site visit. And we have 2 decision-making meetings, and then the last fourth, so the IUCN Green List Committee meeting was held. Next. So this slide is how to reorganize the Eagle group. So through the 3 weeks, for 3 weeks open call, with totally 13 people applied, and then 9 members decided to be the Eagle members, with 4 new members. 2 members resigned of the first Eagle group member. And we tried to get the gender balance and the generation balance. Next. So after reorganizing the Eagle group, so we had the orientation workshop to get familiar with the IUCN indicators and global standards. So the Eagle group members and the local staffs and IUCN reviewer and Debbie attended this meeting. So 2 days workshop. So at the time we tried to provide some explanation on IUCN Green List, and we discussed how to implement it properly in Korea. So we have a discussion to find out adapted indicators and how to use the compass properly. Next. So we discussed how to adapt this indicator. As you know well, the general indicators are well generalized to implement almost every countries without big change. So Eagle at that time, Eagle Group members didn't feel too much change. We don't need much change it. So instead of developing new adapted indicators, the Eagle Group decided to reflect Korean context through adding some verification methods rather than make some new adapted indicators. So we discussed the drafted consideration notes, and so how to use. We already got evidence informations, so we decided to utilizing outcome indexes already developed by KMPS, such as ecosystem health index, stress index, etc. Next slide. So we try to working with the research institute and the local office together. That because of we try to reduce the burden of site managers. So the left side is to make the long-term plan, implementing plan of IUCN Green List in Korea, and right side the report is how to implement it. Three candidate sites. I mean the 3 national parks. I think that this process was very useful to reduce the burdens and the extra works of the local managers might be caused the implementing Green List. Next. And we conduct a site visit. One or two Eagle members attended. And during September, we did the site visit. And there's 5 or 6 members contributed to make the checklist and review the whole compass contents. During the site visit, we made a chance to meet the local staffs and communicate with the stakeholders, various stakeholders, for 1 day for each national parks. Next. So the September 28th, we had a preparation meeting for the final review, the progress of the compass contents. And then the 29th, we had a decision-making meeting with the IUCN reviewers. So we communicate with the reviewers focusing on the process and some contents, and the final check the field mission report and the compass contents. And we made a decision based on consensus. And next slide. So the pilot phase and the delisting phase has also some challenges. So one of major challenges, we need to expand the Eagle groups for enabling to cover various fields. And we have faced, again, the lack of common understanding on the IUCN Green List standard, the local managers and local stakeholders. And we need to proper communication with the various stakeholders. And so some of the local managers still feel the IUCN Green List implementation is the extra, might cause the extra works for them. So they worried about that. So, and some inadequate information and document to verify our achievement, and how to implementing global Green List standard into national management systems. That's our challenges and considerations. Next slide. So in order to effective implementation of the implementation in Korea, so one of the key question is how to Green List standard embedded properly into the national system naturally, so without the extra works. So we saw our national system. So according to Natural Parks Act, so every 5 years we need to conduct a resource survey and management effectiveness evaluation. Then based on this information, we develop the conservation management plan. So some of office might develop implementing plan every year. And then every 5-year or 10-year cycle, we made a new conservation management plan. So it's a 5-year cycle nationally, according to in line with the Natural Park Act. So let's see the IUCN Green List site. It's a 5-year certification duration. So it's the same. So the nationally MEE result is provide self-assessment, and we might find out some information to make GL dossiers. So the stakeholders and the EAGLE members contributed to provide their comments. So we modify and finalize the self-assessment and site summary. Then we, in cooperation with EAGLE and the IUCN reviewers, and we make the IUCN Green List every 5-year cycles. So our main key question is how to implementing it properly. It's combined together. So next slide. This slide shows that we made these tables to the very initial draft plan. So after resource survey and management effectiveness evaluation, then after this, based on this, it's every 5 years. So we made this cycle. So using this information, we try to make the IUCN Green List time properly. So this table shows the 26. We made all national parks to be green list site. This is option 1. Next slide. So option 2 is plan 2 is to most of national parks is management approach is similar. Is the focusing headquarters principles. So we find out some representative sites by national park types, such as mountainous national park, marine and coastal, historic or urban parks. So we may find out some representative areas. So we make a IUCN Green List site that managed totally 4 sites. So this table shows how to make all types of national park to be IUCN Green List site. This is option 2. This next slide. So I think the IUCN Green List provide blueprint on how to manage the protected area well. So we try to find out a way naturally implement Green List in line with national context. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hak-Yong-Hao, for that presentation. And it's really encouraging to see how much progress you've been able to make despite COVID-19. But also, I think it's very interesting to see how you are trying to integrate the Green List into the institutional processes of the Korea National Park Service, with one of the aims being, as you said, to reduce the workload on the site managers and just make this part of their day-to-day and annual work. So I think that's a really interesting case study. I'm just looking at Alex to see if any questions have come in. No questions as yet. So in that case, I suggest we carry on with our final case study, which is from Vietnam. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, Vietnam has just recently had a site added to the Green List, making it the first country in Southeast Asia to have an IUCN Green Listed site. So I'd like to hand over now to Mr. Tu and Nguyen Duc from IUCN Vietnam, who will give a joint presentation together with Mr. Mai Van Nguyen, who's the director of the Van Long Wetland Nature Reserve. So Tu, over to you.
Hello everyone, thanks Scott for letting and organizers for letting me present this. So sorry that I don't know, maybe with the technical reasons. So Mr. Nguyen, who prepares his presentation with me, is not available in the Zoom. So on behalf of him and Green List team in Vietnam, I will present this. Yeah, so here's the content. I'll go to the first slide. So process of adopting really standard at national level. Vietnam is some of the countries in Southeast Asia commit with the Green List program back to the UNPAC Congress in Sydney 2014. And in 1 year later, Vian Forest, the protected area agencies in Vietnam issues a letter and to adopt that. After that, we took some steps. Further, established an ego. Of course, it takes time. You have to advertisement, call for interest. You have screening process. You have reviewer and vice chair of regional protected areas committee involved. Then in April 2017, the Vietnam Eagle was established with 13 members. And yeah, the picture is a training workshop for Eagle at the time made by Dev here today, and Matt at the time is the reviewer assigned for Vietnam. Similar to other, we need to adapt the indicators. It takes few months. In fact, in Vietnam, we did not adapt anything. Just we called the translation note to understand the language of indicator in our context, other than adapt them. At the time, Foresight committed to Eagle standard. Firstly, it's for Long Wetland Nature Reserves in the north of Vietnam, Cát Tiên National Park and Con Đảo National Park in south of Vietnam, and Pumat National Park in center of Vietnam. Yeah, and the picture right down is the Eagle members of Vietnam at the time. We have two co-chairs of the Eagle member to ensure they always, be there to make decisions. So why Vietnam interested in Green List? I think the protected area agency should address this question. However, from what we discussed and from my views, further, like every other government of Vietnam, established a system of protected areas in Vietnam called special use forest systems, and they need to manage that. They need to govern it in a good way to ensure the effectiveness of the system to conserve our biodiversity. So we need a system in hand to evaluate our protected area system. And we try with different things. We have reporting requirements and things like that. And it changes all the time. And it's quite time consuming and also resource consuming to do it. So why don't we simply accept widely, internationally accepted set of standards for the job? Also, yeah, I borrowed these slides from my colleague friend, James Cattles. like many other countries in the world, many nations in the world, we love football. So if we want to join with the international community, we want to send our protected area team to the World Cup of protected area. We need to be, we need to have good governance. So that what we need a fairly. We need to fair place, fairly played. We need level playing fields, and finally, we need to achieve our important goals. So it's simply to explain why Vietnam interested in Green List. Yeah, and now to go to the first Green List side of Vietnam, backgrounds, meditation. Assume Vân Long was established in 2001 for 20 years now. It's a very small areas of 2,700 hectares something, and 70% of the area is the limestone mountains, and 25% is the wetlands. The areas were famous for our endemic primate species, the langas, and it supports the largest population of that species in the world. And yeah, the managers and also our Vietnamese are proud about that. It's also provide very important habitats for many water birds. In addition, it's very important for local livelihoods as provide ecological services and processes to support local livelihoods. And the science also have cultural values together with that. So that the government of Vietnam gazetted that science nature reserve in 2001, and it recognized at Ramsar site in 2017. Here's a map of the site, and the blue is the color is the limestone cat is very important for the Langa. However, that site is situated in the northern plains of Vietnam and surrounded by many other karst hills that heavily exploited for cement industries. So the site is very important, however, under stress and pressures from economic development. Yeah, some picture on Vân Long, you see the langas, very beautiful species, and the wetlands is that's beautiful scenery, provide services not only for agricultural productions, but also for tourism development. So process to list list a site at site level. But first of all, the site commit with the relief programs, and that's for really standard. It has some phases of revolutions. First of all, when we do the assessment, it's the standard version 1.0, and now we change to 1.1, with maybe 2 more in the indicators. After the self-assessment, they identify the gaps, what the site need to fill the gap to meet on the Green List indicator. And we together implementing partner and the site managers with the support from mentor, we discuss how to fill the gap. For example, to fill the gap of information disclosures in decisions and decision-making process. It's very simple. We have the signboards everywhere, on which what allow, what forbidden in the site, and have a public website so every people can access legislation relating to protected area management here. In the right corner is the involvement of local communities in community patrol teams. After finish that periods, we come to the final assessment and the site visit. We cover along with the first site in Vietnam, go to this stage. So we have quite a big group of EGLE members, 3 members visited the site. The site was small. We met the different stakeholders, have interviewed, discussed with them, and this field visit is very important for creating the green listing process. It help to get supplementary information, and also it's help documentation the evidence, because I think that quite many other countries in our area, it is something very good, but sometimes it did not document all the efforts. So when we go to the assessment stage, we have not enough evidence to show that we are doing good. So after that, EGLE decided that the site met on the indicator, and we submitted to the Green List committee, and with the witnesses from reviewer from ASI. And also reviewer, another story. We have the first reviewer, a foreigner who cannot speak in Vietnamese. With a supporter, we go a supporter in Vietnam can speak Vietnamese, but the level of commitment is not enough. So we have new reviewer, and now we have a Vietnamese reviewer who active and who participated with all the activity and help us to speed up the process. And last year, September 2020, Valang released awarded with a Green List certificate. And here is the note from the Green List committee on the site. And of course, which is look at all the indicator. There's still something that Valang is not fully met, and it's very important for the site to look at this and continue to improve the performance to meet on the standard. So benefits from joining Green List program is I think the first important is benchmarking conservation achievement. They know where they go, where they come, and where they can go in future. They were recognized by international and national conservation committee. So very important. And very important, we can access technical and financial support from many different people, from IUCN, from other partners, from EGLE's members, from mentors. And when they have, they can prove that they are doing good, they can access to financial support. Challenges. Alignings Vietnamese practices with Green List standards is not easy. I think it's always same with all other countries. In Vietnam, when try to assess governance, it's very different. I found it's same in China when my Chinese colleagues said that governance have no good definition of term, not easy translated term in our language. And yeah, legislation for PA management in Vietnam sometimes an obstacle to widening the participation of other sector in PA management and decision-making process. Sometimes our centralized system stop the participation or engagement of public, of local communities and other stakeholders. Yeah, because yes, I think it's same in many countries because the assessment is not compulsory and not prescribed by law. So no aside financial and technical resources for this kind of assessment. So it still depends on the donor project or some kind of outsider support. Our next step is to fulfill the conditions required by Green List Committee, as I mentioned last slide. And yeah, they hope to yield Green List standard, what they still lacking to, and what they already achieved to guide the management activities in future. So lesson learned, yeah, Green List is the quite complicated process. So yeah, not easy. Evidence is we need involvement of reviewers and EGO members who not only their first job, but it's what to do. Yeah, this exercise. It's very useful for on-site different legal status in guiding management action. In Vietnam, we have different level categories of protected areas. And also the conserved area also can use us to identify the gaps. From that, design the action plan to fill the gaps. And from that, they can achieve and to move to international standards. And yeah, I think somebody already mentioned Malaysia, for example, mentoring is very important in assessment process. In Vietnam, we have on issues, as I think in the presentation that already mentioned, we have not many, not easy to find experts to work with us in that. We have good people who can be in member of EGOs, so they cannot be a mentor. So sometimes it has to be harmonized. For example, for EGO in Vietnam, first of all, we have 13 EGO members. One, he relocated, he resettled in other countries, so we have 12. And one guy who worked very close with Vân Long. So by the end, we decided that, that person will reside from EGO members and become the first mentor in Vietnam. As a summary, Protected Area Management Agency in Vietnam is VN Forest. They who manage the special use forest system in Vietnam can use Green List standard to monitor and evaluate PA system. Donor can use Green List indicator to assess and evaluate investment impacts. till this end, yeah, we have many donor and other development partners already discussed and ready to use Green List for other sites in Vietnam, for example, CISS. Recently, WWF under a USAID project will use Green List to accept their project site in Vietnam. Yeah, Green List team is now developing the we could base benchmarking and evaluation index value for Green List criteria. This will be something more quantitative and easy to use, and you should have to make the assessment more straightforward and easier for practitioners. Yeah, it's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Tu, and congratulations again to Vietnam for having the first green listed site in Southeast Asia. And we wish you good success with the other sites as well. I see that a number of questions have come in the chat box, so I'll turn over to Alex to facilitate. We've got probably just maybe 10 minutes or so for any questions that you might have. So please do continue to put those into the chat box. Alex, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Very, very interesting series of presentations from my perspective there to hear about some of the experiences. And we've had a couple of questions come in on the chat, and allow me to present those. The first I'd like to direct to colleagues in Korea, firstly. And colleagues in Korea, could you tell us about, or could you comment on how managers at the site level have perceived the green list and the green listing process? And did they find the process useful for their own management needs? And what has been the response at the sites after achieving Green List certification? I know that some of the sites in Korea are currently undergoing re-evaluation, but could you tell us about the responses from the site managers and how they saw the process as being useful in Korea?
Okay, so the site managers are also pleased to introduce implementing the IUCN Green List as a management direction of how to manage the national park properly. But they also happy to get a more chance to communicate with better stakeholders on specific issues. So which are the Green List provides some indicator to communicate with stakeholders. So that's the make some opportunity to local managers to communicate with stakeholders. They're happy to communicate with stakeholders on that specific issues. But however, they have some burdens. I mean, the workload and some burdens to prove their achievement. There are other the audit system. Already they got some audit system on some management to evaluation internally. Usually the headquarters evaluate the local office, and some other the objective groups to assess their achievement internally. So they sort that another kind of the evaluation process. So that's why we focus on the reduce that kind of burdens to local steps. That's the feeling of the feeling of local steps on the IUCN Green List, I think. And then after achieve the IUCN Green List, the local stakeholder, so wondering, is there any change to manage the national park to already be the IUCN Green List? Some management approaches changed or not? They just wondering. And local NGO also worried about that. So, and some local NGO has got expectation to more focusing on the conservation, that kind of the expectation from local NGOs. But as you know well, but there is no change. The national park management is managed by according to the National Act. There are no big change, but the one change is the recognition, awareness on the importance of national parks, and we more focusing on the more chance to communicate with stakeholders. I think to encourage more communication with the stakeholder is the main benefit to implementing IUCN Green List to national parks. Is there any question on that? Is it proper answer? I'm not sure.
No, I think that's fine, Mr. Hagyong. I think you've addressed the questions very well. So thank you for that response.
Okay.
If I could direct the next question to our colleagues from Malaysia, and particularly to Ms. Aceh Chung from the protected area in Malaysia, and that is, the question is about the costs of green listing at a site level, the financial commitments that need to be made to achieve green listing. And could you share with us what some of the costs have been, and then to become a candidate site and to go through the green listing process? And how were these sourced? I remember during your presentation, you talked about some of the challenges in finding resources, but what do you think the costs have been so far in the process of undertaking the candidate phase?
Okay. I think I mentioned that in my presentations that we don't have funding for that. So all these applications are using our extra time. So it's only a two-man job. It probably require more people to do it, but because of Risk Guardian is a very small organization, we have only like currently we have only like 15. So there are 5 management staff, scientists, and also the others 10 were just a few workers. So everything are very tight. So application for green list, we don't have extra fund for that. Is that answering the questions?
That's fine, Aceh. Maybe Dev, if we could bring you in on this particular question as well. And from your experience already with the green listing program, what are the kind of costs that are associated with the green listing candidate phase for a given site? What are some of the expectations there?
Can I have the questions again? I cannot catch you.
Dev?
Yeah, sorry. Were you directing that question to me, Alex?
Yes, yes, to you, Dev, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's a good question, and it's true, as Malaysia says, currently, let's say at a global level, as much as we would love to have a global green list fund to be able to support sites to implement the standard, we don't. What we find typically happens is that as is happening in Malaysia, the sites are incorporating the standard into their existing management cycles, or projects related to protected area management effectiveness or governance are integrating the green list standard and getting some budget from relevant projects that are whose aims are aligned with the objectives of the standard. So there's a diversity of ways that sites will raise resources that are required for interventions needed to comply with the standard. So that's at the site implementation level. From the certification process itself, the certification itself is free, and the standard is open access. The Eagle members serve as volunteers, so there isn't a staff time cost for Eagle members. The main cost really is around the meeting logistics of getting together the expert groups who would typically meet in person, although with in the light of COVID currently, a lot of these meetings are taking place virtually. But typically the global average, we say, is to allow for about $10,000 US per year. That would cover the costs of, say, 50% of that to cover the cost of Eagle meetings. Typically, there will be one meeting for the training that typically happens in person. So that's a 2-day meeting, and at least one other meeting for an evaluation meeting. So on average, you could say about 2 meetings per year for the expert group. The other 50% of that budget is to contribute to the cost of an independent reviewer. This is a third-party reviewer that essentially serves as an auditor to make sure that all of the rules and procedures in the IUCN user manual are being followed by the Eagle and by IUCN. It's an IUCN standard, so we need to make sure that there's an independent reviewer that's reviewing these processes. So as has come up in some of the presentations, each country has an independent reviewer, and that cost is typically something that's contributed to from the country. Hope that answered the question, Alex. Thanks.
That's great, Dev. Yeah, I think you've characterised some of the costs there, the anticipated costs certainly, quite well. I'd like to turn to just one more question. There are a couple more in the chat. I've noted those. We're running short of time, so I'm just going to address one more of those questions. And I'd like to bring in Professor Li from China. And Professor Li, in your presentation, you made an excellent summary of some of the benefits of the Green List process for sites in China, in promoting excellence in management at the site, bringing recognition to good management at the site, at sites, encouraging multi-stakeholder participation, and also standardizing management and management practices. And that's what we heard from some of the other presenters as well. However, I'd like to turn to the point that you made and a question that was raised in the chat, and that is about promoting interest in tourism. Have you seen the green listing process in being a candidate site and having green listed sites, certified sites? Have you seen an increasing interest in tourism coming in those sites as well? Professor Li.
Hello, Professor Li is not right here now, so.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe Dung in Vietnam. Mr. Dung in Vietnam, what about at Van Long Nature Reserve? Has the green listing process in that particular site, has it brought greater interest from the tourism sector in Vietnam at Van Long Nature Reserve?
Maybe it's not good time to answer the question. You know that the tourist industry is facing a terrible period right now. Well, last year, Van Long received some, 40, 50, 60 something thousands of visitors. But this year, I think just 1,000-2,000. It changed so much, and even the tourism enterprise there, yeah, they facing many problems, and it's not exactly to make any statement right now. However, the very big investor in that area, you might know by Chang An Bai Ding. He's some kind of Vietnamese millionaire, multi-millionaires who invest in 2 tourism areas in North and South Van Long. He's very interested, and he even promised Van Long managers to invest in the Green List, the certification ceremonies for that. However, because we're too busy by end of the year and also beginning of this year, so it's not happened. But of course, it's draw the interest from the tourism industries. Sure.
Better.
That's great, thanks, Tu. And I've noted the additional comments in the chat. I'll pass those on to the facilitators of the webinar and to be recorded. And I'll pass back to you, Scott, to take it on to the next session.
Great, thank you, Alex. And so we just have one final presentation, very short, just 5 slides, just to tell you a little bit about IUCN's thoughts for the future of taking forward the IUCN Green List in Asia. If I could have the next slide, please. So starting first, just looking at the current status of the Green List, I think a quick summary of that is that we are seeing rapid take-up of the standard across the region and growing interest in the standard. So at the moment, we have Green List processes formally underway in 6 countries in Asia: Bhutan, China, Laos, Malaysia, Republic of Korea, and Vietnam. We currently have 10 sites that have been inscribed on the Green List, and there are something like 25 additional sites that are at some stage in the process. We have discussions underway with at least 4 other countries about starting the Green List process, and we have a number of sources of funding to help support the process. We're receiving support from the Ministry of Environment Korea, the Ministry for the Environment in Germany, and we also have the Tech for Nature project, which is under the IUCN Huawei partnership. All of these are providing a certain amount of dedicated support for taking forward the Green List in Asia. We're also increasingly trying to build the Green List into large regional projects and programs as we develop those. So just to give you an example of one of those, we're about to start the second phase, the implementing phase of the Bay of Bengal Large Marine Ecosystem project. This is a GEF-funded project being implemented by FAO. And here we hope to use the Green List standard and apply that to marine protected areas. So that's a quick overview of current status. Priorities for IUCN are it really comes down to 2 issues. How can we continue to provide effective backstopping, technical support, capacity building for those countries and sites that are already embarking on the Green List journey? Whilst at the same time, how can we meet this growing demand that we're seeing across the region from other countries that are interested in taking up the Green List standard? And of course, all of these things have implications in terms of time, resources, and staffing. Next, please. So what is IUCN planning to do to try to address some of these issues, some of these requirements? Well, one of the first things that we are planning to do is to develop a regional Green List strategy. This will really aim to set forth a strategic framework for taking forward the Green List in Asia. It will correlate to the global Green List strategy, but look specifically at the issues and priorities in Asia and try to set out a number of structured priorities over the next 3 to 5 years for taking forward the standard. We hope to appoint a full-time regional Green List coordinator very soon, who will be based here in the IUCN Asia regional office in Bangkok. And that person's full-time job will be to support the Green List standard, the rollout of the standard across Asia. And this will be someone who will be available to provide technical support, who will be available to answer questions and queries, who will be able to assist in capacity building, etc. So we see that position as being really quite key to taking forward the standard. And we hope that we will have someone in post sometime this year. Obviously, we're continuing to fundraise for the Green List wherever possible, as I mentioned, by integrating the Green List into project proposals to try to ensure that we have a pipeline of funding support coming through to keep the Green List running. We're very keen to continue to promote peer-to-peer learning and cross-country exchange, for example, through the Asia Protected Areas Partnership, as we were discussing earlier. As I also mentioned, we've recently established a Green List working group under APAP to fulfill exactly this purpose. But we're also keen to continue events like this, such as this webinar, technical workshops. Perhaps later on, once travel becomes possible again, we can look at exchanges between countries and those sorts of things. Finally, we're keen to continue to raise awareness of the Green List, to build support for the Green List, to work with partners like the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, and to make maximum use of some of the big regional and international events that will be coming up over the next year or so. One of those is the second Asia Parks Congress, which will be hosted by Sabah, Malaysia in May 2022. And one of the core themes of that Congress will be around effective management of protected areas. So that's obviously a golden opportunity to bring countries together to share experience and also to continue to raise awareness of the standard and promote awareness of the standard. Next slide, please. In terms of further resources and information, if you would like to know more about the Green List standard, there is a dedicated Green List website. This is still under development, but it is operational and you can access it at the address there. I'd really encourage you to take a look. There's a wealth of information on there. We would also be very happy to arrange a virtual introduction to the IUCN Green List of maybe 1 or 2 hours for your country or for your national protected area system. If that's something in which you might be interested, please just let us know, and we would be happy to organize that. And finally, if you have questions, if today has inspired you, but you still have queries that we weren't able to answer today, please don't hesitate to reach out. You're very welcome to reach out to me in the first instance, and I'll try to assist. But if I can't answer your question, then I'll seek support from the larger Green List community, from Devon headquarters, James Hardcastle, from the World Commission on Protected Areas, and others. So please do reach out. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and it's really just to invite you to join us on the IUCN Green List journey towards more effectively and more fairly managed, protected, and conserved areas. So thank you very much for your participation today. And just before we close, I'd just like to hand over to my colleague, Mr. Ko, who is seconded from the Korea National Park Service, but working here with us in IUCN as the Program Officer, Protected Areas, just to give some final remarks. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ko.
Yes, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. I hope that you find it interesting and informative, and that it will have inspire you to take forward the IUCN Green List in your own country if you're not already doing so. I would like to thank all the speakers for sharing their experiences and insight with us today. It has been particularly valuable to hear about the benefits and challenges of using the IUCN Green List at the site level. I would also like to thank all of our participants for making the time to join the call today. I know that everyone has a busy schedule and competing demands on their time, and we are grateful for your participation. Finally, if you should have any remaining questions from today's webinar or would like further information about the IUCN Green List, please do not hesitate to reach out to IUCN, and we would be happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you once again for participating, and please stay in touch. Bye. Bye for now. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.